I want to introduce our favorite congressman from the 4th District, representing us up in Washington, D.C. He should have came in with his John Wayne guns, but, I respect that. Anyway, once again, Congressman Scott Desjarlais.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be indoors on a rainy day. We can't mow our yard, so we might as well be in here talking about something near and dear to all of us, our Second Amendment rights. And I can tell you that when it comes to those, in Washington, I have your back, and will always have your back. I know there's a lot of issues that are going on right now in Washington. A lot of this came about by the tragedy in Sandy Hook, and I don't think there's anybody in here that probably didn't have a tremendous impact. We all have children and grandchildren. I still have a little girl in kindergarten. She's about to finish, but I know that night Amy and I laid there with Maggie, let her stay up past midnight, just thankful that she was there and feeling for all those families who had lost their kids. But so often in politics and in the world, in Washington, they try to knee-jerk to a tragedy or a difficult situation, and that's what we were seeing in response to this. We had the shooting in Aurora at the theater, and numerous other shootings on campuses across the country over the past couple decades. And I think what we're learning is that there's no way to legislate morality or craziness, and giving stricter gun laws has never proven to decrease the amount of violent crime. And that's proven in Washington, D.C., the very city which tries to impose these laws upon us. Strictest gun laws in the country, highest rate of violent crime. Chicago, home of President Obama, Illinois, some of the strictest gun laws in the nation, highest violent crime rates. All we're doing by passing more and more laws against our Second Amendment rights is making it harder on those who abide by laws and follow the laws. The criminals will not follow the laws as many as we make. They're going to continue to break the law. So it's so important that we protect our rights, and we can't waver from that. Thankfully, in the Senate here a couple weeks ago, they voted the attempt to take away many of our rights and impose more restrictions on veterans. They voted that down. They may as well have, because it wasn't going to go anywhere in the House. But I'll tell you that anytime that they get the ball moving down the track, there is a threat that could happen, so we need to remain vigilant and make sure that doesn't happen. Now, I'm sure many of the veterans here are alarmed. I heard, Michelle, you talked about 114,000. Not to correct your numbers, but as of about 2 weeks ago, that number is 129,000. So that number's growing. Veterans are getting letters. If you have to or are required to have somebody take care of your finances for you, what they call a fiduciary, then you're automatically put on a list and sent to the FBI as being incapable of managing your own affairs, and that includes your ability to own guns. There was a couple of amendments offered in this gun bill 2 weeks ago, one by Senator Burr, another by the head of the VA committee on the House side, Jeff Miller from Florida. And what this was doing was suggesting that rather than the VA having the authority to basically make that decision and take those rights away from you, you would have to go through a judiciary system to have that decision made. And that amendment was not passed through the Senate. It may come back as a standalone, but I think most veterans were in favor of that. The VA was opposed to that. I know the VFW, or the American Legion anyway, was for the amendments offered by the Representative Miller and Senator Burr. So we'll continue to keep tabs on that and make sure that we do what's right by our veterans. And I'd like to join Mr. Angel in saying thank you to our veterans. I had utmost respect for veterans as a VA physician. My mother is a VA nurse for 44 years, and my service and ability to treat our veterans in my medical practice. It was always my favorite part of the day when I'd have a veteran come in and share stories with me. I had so many great veterans of the Second World War in my practice. I had a man who was on a freighter in Pearl Harbor, and he turned over my face sheet and started drawing out the harbor for me and how it all went down. Pretty fascinating history to get to listen to firsthand. And another patient who was on the Yorktown went into the water when it was sunk, and got to relive that story with him. Had a man who was on the Arkansas bombing the beachhead before the invasion, and had another little guy that, I shouldn't say a little guy, he was shorter, but took off his hat one day, and I'd seen him on several occasions, and he had a bullet crease in his head. And I didn't know that's what it was, but I asked, I said, you know, what's that scar on your head there? He says, well, I was on Iwo Jima, and some Jap shot me in the head, and he goes, I reckon it's the same bastard shot me in the ass. I got one right here too. He had another bullet hole there that I hadn't seen. So, yeah, I thanked him for his service, and like most of those veterans, he looked at his feet almost embarrassed by the attention that I was giving him that was so well deserved. And you know, I just can't say enough about the service that you've all provided for us, and you know, it means even more to me. I didn't know that was possible, being in Congress and being involved in some of the decisions that affect you, and certainly our younger men who've served in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, it was an incredible thrill to go over and visit with the troops in Afghanistan last October. Dr. Phil Rowe, my colleague from East Tennessee, and I and several others went over on a military Codel to look at the response time to injury, the golden hour, getting people off the battlefield into the forward care facilities and being able to take care of them and save their lives. And we're also dealing with the traumatic brain injury element and the mental health issues, the PTSD that so many of these young men and women are facing as they come back home. And you know, it's really important that we take care of these issues. It's alarming to see the suicide rate among our veterans now is up to about 22 service members per day taking their own lives, and this is obviously unacceptable. And so, you know, I think it's really important as we move forward to be very diligent and make sure that we take care of those who took such good care of us. And we'll continue to look at that too. And that's why, you know, these veterans' rights bills that are coming forth in terms of Second Amendment are so important, because just because somebody can't take care of their finances doesn't mean that they're incompetent to own a gun. And there needs to be a process where this is handled in a fairer manner. And you know, we'll see as we move forward, as this number that we talked about grows, what we can do about this. And you know, it's different than the way people in society should be treated, and you know, our veterans are someone we have to look after. So there's a couple other things I wanted to talk about. I know this is a Second Amendment rally, but I think probably everyone sitting here feels like I do, and that we need to just be vigilant in our protection of our Second Amendment rights. So if you'll indulge me, I wanted to talk about a couple other things that are going on that impact us and our veterans and our military personnel. One would be Syria. We had a briefing with Secretary of State John Kerry a week ago, and I still think he would be taken more serious if he had that little helmet on that he was up in the gun turret with when he was campaigning against Bush. It was hard to listen to him and take him seriously. But anyways, Secretary Kerry told us about the threat in Syria with the sarin nerve gas, and that President Obama was thinking about taking military action because they'd crossed some red line. And this concerns me after what we went through in Iraq and Afghanistan, and who our enemies are and what our exit strategy may be. So, you know, I hope that as these events continue to develop, that we take a good hard look at what our involvement's going to be. Basically, Syria is about 100% Muslim nation. There are different factions fighting against one another, as they so often do in that tumultuous Middle East region. And we don't have really any friends there in that group other than Israel. And you know, going in and giving military assistance to one to defeat another, I don't know what the end game is going to be. You know, obviously the overtones here, we want to make sure that we don't have crazy people that use weapons of mass destruction. Remember those terms from the earlier in the decade. But you know, we don't want those getting in the wrong hands, but also getting involved in another military engagement, sending our men and women on the ground to fight somebody else's battle. I would urge extreme caution on that. So that's not what they're saying right now. They're saying no boots on the ground, as they always do before they send boots on the ground. But we'll watch that closely and update it. North Korea has been another threat. We got no shortage of crazy leaders over there, and the one in North Korea is probably right at close to the top of the list right now. But we know they have nuclear weapons. They've detonated them. We know they have missiles. We know they like to test them. They're not as sophisticated probably as they need to be to reach us, but certainly they can raise havoc. They say that they've got warheads small enough to fit on some of these missiles, so they are a threat. But the posture that we have right now is stepped down a little bit because of a rare opportunity to engage with China for military purposes and suppression purposes, and it appears at this time China is at least stepping up and doing the right thing. They know that this guy is crazy too, and most of their fuel for their fighter jets, in fact I think all of it, is probably imported from China. So we're seeing restrictions coming out of China that will probably help suppress that threat a little bit. One other topic, has anybody been following the Benghazi event? Okay. Well, let me update you a little bit on that too, because on my government oversight committee, we've been paying close attention to this. Secretary Clinton wants this to go away. Secretary Kerry wants it to go away. The president wants it to go away. But bottom line, there were lives lost and there were lies told, and we need to get to the bottom of it for those families and for the people who could be in harm's way the next time. And so this coming Wednesday, we'll be holding a hearing where we're actually going to get to listen to some people that have not had an opportunity to share their stories up until now due to threat of retaliation from the government. So they've got protection, and if you're not doing anything Wednesday, I think it's at 11 or 11:30 Eastern time. That hearing will probably maybe broadcast on C-SPAN, but we'll have an opportunity to question and hear from some of the people that were actually there. I think what you're going to find is, just as you suspected, the stories that were told, certainly the movie trailer, that was never really in play. They knew from the beginning this was a terrorist attack. There's been some arrests of some suspects, or at least there's 3 identified suspects now in the bombing. We know that the State Department was asked for help. We know that people on the ground were waiting for help that never came. And we just simply can't allow this to happen again. And so as the next week unfolds, I think you're going to see the beginning of more transparency. And I think that's really important for those who serve to know that they're not going to be left alone in the situation that they were last time. So you can look forward to that. Did anybody have any questions on the veterans amendments that were offered with this gun bill? I know we're not in a great format to do question and answer, but we can try if anybody had any comments or questions. Okay. Well, we covered those, or I tried to cover those pretty well. If you have any comments, just see me afterwards, and I'll try to walk through those. But, we've got a lot of battles ahead of us. Washington's a very difficult place to work right now. There's a big divide, as you know, between parties, between the 3 branches of government that right now seems to want to operate as one branch of government. And we've got to deal with this for a couple more years. So it's really important that people get out and support candidates that are going to stand up for what they believe in. We've got an election coming up in a year where we need to take control of the Senate across the country. And it's so important that we do that, because we've got to reverse the trend on so many different areas, not just Second Amendment, just our eroding freedoms that these gentlemen spoke about earlier. It's crucial that we do that. We've got financial issues, entitlement issues that are draining and breaking the country day in and day out. And we got to teach a generation that it's okay to work again. We got some younger people in here right now. And how many people in here had a job before they were 18? About every hand's going up, and probably a lot younger than that. Right now in this country, those age 18 to 26 are at the lowest workforce participation ever in the history of this country. For some reason, we have a government that's trying to teach people that it's okay to rely on them, to depend on them. We all know that isn't true, and we've got to get our young people back to work to help support the country, and we got to get rid of all these safety nets and entitlements that have expanded way beyond what they were ever intended to do if we're going to get the country back on track. I won't even get into health care, because that's a whole nother luncheon on itself, and I know everybody's probably getting ready to dig into that food. So I want to thank Iva Michelle for hosting this very important rally, and again, I want to thank the veterans who came out here today in the rain to listen and help support this event. So thank you for having me.